starting off with some breaking developments that are coming in right this minute from India. The Indian court saying that do not deport the Rohingya. The government has to be sensitive towards Rohingya is the stand coming in from the Indian court. India's apex court says Rohingyas cannot be deported. Supreme Court says cannot deport Rohingya until the case is heard. It also said that the government has to be sensitive towards their plight. The Indian court has given out these observations regarding the members of the Rohingya community. Remember, this has been a crisis of Myanmar's making, which has spilled over into both India and Bangladesh. The Indian top court now coming out and saying that Rohingyas cannot be deported until the case is heard. Also saying that the government has to be sensitive towards their plight. This, of course, coming in close on the heels of the stand that was taken by the government in the Supreme Court. Let's go across to our correspondent Jessica Taneja, who's joining us for more on this from the Supreme Court. Jessica, what do we know as of now?
Well, Molly, the apex court has said that Rohingyas can't be deported, and it's a sensitive issue. In fact, let's remember what the government affidavit had said earlier, that that Rohingya refugees need to be deported because they pose a national security threat, as well as some of them have in fact affiliations with the ISI and other terrorist groups. So they need to be in fact deported immediately. But the apex court has come out in support of the Rohingya refugees, in fact saying that the government has to be sensitive towards the Rohingya refugees, and that they need to take care of the refugees who are coming to the country. But at the moment, they've put this on hold. So one will have to wait and see on how the government, in fact, comes out with its response to the Rohingya issue on, in fact, November 21st, when the case will be heard further by the petitioners who are alleging that the Rohingya refugees are being treated badly in the country and that they need to be given a place to stay.
Right, stay with me please, Jessica. I'm also getting in the latest from Kartikeya Sharma, our political editor. Kartikeya, this of course comes as a huge snub in a way for the government, which has made it stand very clear as well.
Yes, Molly, I have a question. Yes, Molly, before I answer that, I have a question for Jessica. Jessica, I would like you to clarify whether this is an advisory issued by the state, or is it in form of an order, or is it an obiter dicta by the justice? Can you elaborate on that, Jessica?
Well, Kartikeya, in fact, the apex court has just, in fact, come up with certain observations saying that the government needs to be sensitive when it comes to, refugees. Since India has been, catering to various refugees in many parts of the country, we need to even look after the Rohingya refugees who are, in fact, bordering around India and, of course, around the Bangladesh border as well. So, in fact, that is what exactly the apex court is saying. The government has to be sensitive towards Rohingya refugees, not specifically talking about refugees in the country, but also now that we have a situation. But earlier, remember, the government stand has been completely different from what the apex court has said today. So these are, in fact, directives issued to the government to take care of Rohingya refugees.
So, Jessica, is it correct to say till the matter is disposed by the Supreme Court, or till the matter reaches conclusion, or the order on the Rohingya issue is passed, till then no executive action on deportation can take place? Is that correct, Jessica?
Kartikeya, because remember, what the government in its affidavit has said, that it's the executive policy of the state to take certain decisions which are independent and statutory for the government, and the apex court cannot get involved in the policies which are limited to the state. So when that case is concerned, in fact, this is a big blow for the government, who's been contesting the fact that Rohingya refugees need to be deported. And remember, they've given various, reasons as to why the refugees need to be deported. But the apex court has come out in support for the refugees, saying that India is in fact a hub of refugees, and we cannot give them a status wherein they are left for themselves to spend at this point in time. So in fact,
So Jessica, are you saying that they will not be deported till the matter is settled?
Absolutely, Kartikeya, they will not be deported. That is exactly what the apex court has given a direction of. That the Rohingya refugees will not be deported till the time the apex court hears the matter, wherein a bunch of petitions have been patched in the apex court to examine as to what the course of this particular hearing will go forward with.
Right, Stephen, please, Jessica, Karthik, I have a question for you as well. This, of course, is going to be a matter which will be heard by the Supreme Court until the matter is settled. As Jessica is pointing out, Rohingyas cannot be deported, but at the same time, does come as a snub to the government.
Absolutely a snub. There is no doubt about it. You know, this was something which was being articulated by RSS. This was something which was articulated by the top echelons of Bharatiya Janata Party. See, there is no doubt that India has a problem in terms of illegal immigrants. There is no doubt that demographic change in Assam has taken place because of illegal immigrants from Bangladesh. There is no doubt that the indigenous Assamese have actually felt the brunt of it, and this is the reason why Bharatiya Janata Party is in power. And it has led to a lot of reaction because of the ethnic and religious complexity of Northeast. But then on the other hand, Rohingyas are not illegal immigrants. Rohingyas are being categorized as refugees. That's the difference. And I think Supreme Court went by that. So on the basis of they being categorized as victims of violence who had to flee their home and hence they become refugees, the court says you have to distinguish between a terrorist, an old woman and a child. You know, they can't be terrorists. So that way the articulation of Supreme Court has been pretty much nuanced. So, but sometimes political parties fall prey to popular discourse. So, you know, the illegal immigrants and refugees get clapped together. But nonetheless, it would be foolhardy for anyone to say that the problem of illegal immigrants has no role to play in the politics of Northeast. It might be a tight slap on Bharatiya Janata Party's face from Supreme Court today, but electorally, it benefits them.
Let's also take a closer look at the stand that's been taken by the government, Karthik, so far, maintaining that members of the Rohingya community are a threat to national security. That, of course, is the major argument that the centre has put forth in front of the Apex Court as well.
Well, see, you know, to say that, you know, this is the decisive movement, or this is the point after which, you know, or the inflection point. I don't think this is the inflection point of the case. My understanding is it just tells you what the court thinks, you know, what is the opinion of people hearing the case and in which direction it might continue to move towards, which means that the government will really have to nuance its views on the problem of refugees. But nonetheless, the concerns of government too needs to be factored in. The day Hejong and Chakma refugees were given the permanent residence and citizenship, there were riots in Arunachal Pradesh. We must not forget the far distant reality of Northeast. Just because it's not close to Delhi doesn't mean the impact is any less. The impact is far more strong and grave.
Right, stay with us please, Karthiki and Jessica. Just a quick roundup for those who might just be tuning in. The Supreme Court has observed that no Rohingya refugees should be deported until the next date of hearing in the case, which also means that as our correspondent Jessica Taneja just clarified for us, that till the matter is settled by the Apex Court, till the matter is being heard, members of the Rohingya community cannot be deported. This, of course, is a snub for the government, which has throughout maintained that Rohingya community poses a threat to national security as well. The Supreme Court observing that national importance cannot be secondary, and at the same time, human rights of Rohingyas should be kept in mind. I do want to go back across to Jessica, since she was witnessing the arguments inside the court as well. Jessica, what more do we know at this point?
You know, Molly, the Supreme Court has in fact it's come close to ordering, in fact, the centre to not deport Rohingyas, is what we've been reporting so far. And it has posted the matter for November 21st, but it has permitted the petitioners to move court if any contingency is reported that deportation arises in between. The centre is in fact in a position to, you know, enforce its right and in fact, deport Rohingyas. Remember, Molly, the central government in its affidavit has contended the fact that, you know, Rohingya refugees need to be deported. They cannot stay in India illegally. And there were also talks of issuing them Aadhaar card and new numbers where the personal information could be verified. But that seems like a distant plan. But what the government has completely alleged that, you know, it has some executive policy powers where it can do what it has to do, and the court should not intervene. So that makes it clear, you know, when the Apex Court says that that plan needs to be put on hold, and yes, we can exercise our judicial our judicial plan there, or perhaps our reach here and say that, you know, the government should not really do what it's doing at this point in time, not look at Rohingya refugees with that particular light, and take them into consideration that they can still stay in India without being hindered.
Right, stay with us please, Jessica. Let's also take a listen into what Senior Advocate Prashant Bhushan had to say on this.
Court will need to hear this matter at length. They have fixed it, therefore, for hearing on the 21st of November. The court also observed that till that time there should not be any deportation of these refugees.
The latest that we have from the Indian top court, the Supreme Court granting more time to all the parties to argue, and has posted the matter on the Rohingya crisis for further hearing on November 21st. The Supreme Court observing that national importance cannot be secondary, and at the same time human rights of Rohingyas should be kept in mind. Supreme Court observing that no Rohingya refugees should be deported until the next date of hearing in the case. So till the matter is settled, no members of the Rohingya community can be deported. That's the observation coming in from the Indian Supreme Court, also saying that the government needs to be sensitive when it comes to the members of the Rohingya community. Let's also contextualize this for you. The Rohingya crisis, which has spilled over from Myanmar to both India and Bangladesh. The Indian government had earlier as well in its affidavit maintained that members of the Rohingya community are a threat to national security. Also going on and saying that Rohingya members also stand to be used by anti-social elements and members of terror outfits as well. And the Indian top court today asking the centre to, in fact, granting more time to all the parties to argue, and has posted the matter for further hearing on November 21st. The Supreme Court observing that national importance cannot be secondary, and at the same time, human rights of Rohingyas should be kept in mind. Supreme Court observing that no Rohingya refugees should be deported until the next date of hearing in the case. We also have a senior correspondent, Raghavendra Rao, getting us more on this. Raghavendra, if you just look at the larger picture here, the government has made its stand very clear. The Indian top court now saying that the government needs to be sensitive, but at the same time, there is no inflection point, of course, as far as the proceedings go. We are looking at the next date of hearing on November 21st. I also want to ask you, Myanmar has come under severe criticism. Aung San Suu Kyi's role has been questioned as well, and her failure in a way to tackle the crisis over the last few weeks as both India and Bangladesh tackle this humanitarian crisis. What's the latest that we know at this point from Myanmar in terms of the action that it is expected to take?
Well, you know, the Indian government stand has been very, very consistent. They have clearly stated before the Supreme Court that Rohingyas are a security threat to India, and these illegal immigrants need to be deported back to Myanmar. Now, that has been the stance from the Indian government for a while. Also, in one of the earlier hearings, the council representing the central government had told the Supreme Court that this was a policy decision, an executive decision, and it should not be interfered in by the judiciary. And in arguing so, the centre was trying to tell the Supreme Court that security of the country, it's a sovereign function and it needs to be safeguarded. And in that context, the government felt that these Rohingyas, some of them could have terror links, some of them were vulnerable to be exploited by terror groups like Pakistan-based Lashkar-e-Toiba, Jaish-e-Mohammed, even the ISIS was named. Now, that has been the Indian government's stance in this entire crisis. But yes, the Indian government has come under severe criticism from various international fora. Right. As far as the human rights angle is concerned, we had the UN human rights body questioning India's decision to
Since you mentioned the UN human rights body, Raghavendra, just hold that thought there. We also have Dr. Surya Dev, who is the Indian advisor at UNHRC, joining us for more on this. Dr. Dev, appreciate your speaking with us here on WION. I do want to ask for your initial reaction first to the Indian top court's observations, saying that the government needs to be sensitive towards the plight of the members of the Rohingya community, and asking the government to not deport the Rohingyas till the matter is settled. Dr. Dev? Yes.
Yes.
Dr. Dev, my question to
Sorry,
you.
I could not hear.
Yes. Can I have your initial reaction to the Indian top court's observations asking the government to not deport Rohingyas, asking the government to also be sensitive towards the plight of the members of the Rohingya community?
Okay, I've not yet seen the judgment, but my initial reaction is consistent with what the Supreme Court should have done. Because even if India is not a party to the Refugee Convention, it has obligations under international customary law, and it has obligations under the Indian Constitution. And it is very unfair to categorize the whole community as a potential terrorist target. So these decisions about national security have to be made on a case-by-case basis if there is concrete information available. You cannot club the entire population that, okay, these are the people we have to separate and deal with differently. That's my feeling.
Dr. Dev, also looking at how this is a humanitarian crisis of Myanmar's making, which has in a way spilled over into India and Bangladesh. As far as the action that Myanmar so far has taken and continues to take, according to you, what really is the need of the hour to ensure that the crisis does not swell?
I think considering the India's growing political and economic clout, I think it should take a more proactive role at the regional level. These challenges are to be dealt with as working together. I think no one country can handle those situations. It will be more effective and efficient if India shows leadership in the region and works with other partner countries, and then they work out what is the best possible way of working with the UN agencies as well on the ground.
Dr. Dev, appreciate your speaking with us, but I do want to just ask you to hold that thought there, please. We also have Senior Advocate KTS Tulsi joining us on the broadcast for more on this. Good afternoon, sir. Your initial reaction to the Indian top court's observations?
I wholeheartedly welcome the judgment of the Supreme Court. I am so glad that eventually the human rights angle of this problem, catastrophic problem, has been understood, and after all, India has obligations under the international law, under the treaties to which we are signatories, and a treaty is a source of law. If the executive were to act or seek to act contrary to their obligations under the international law, the courts can very well direct them to hold their hands, and therefore I'm so glad that people who are fighting for survival, they were going to be thrown virtually into the ocean. So at least that will not happen, and India will set a good record of being able to manage the humanitarian crisis.
Mr. Tulsi, the stand that the government has taken so far also in a way suggested that members of the Rohingya community stand as a threat to national security. In that context, the Indian top court's observation, of course, as far as the proceedings go, the matter is listed for the next hearing on November 21st. But this can be seen, sir, as a temporary relief, certainly, for the Rohingya community, isn't it?
Yes, of course, and it's too generalized a statement that they are a threat. You can't hold the entire community and to be a threat.
Absolutely.
If there are individuals, they have to be identified and dealt with. After all, there are so many people who are threats, who are said to be threats. The Naxalites are here, Maoists are here, the J&K militants are there. We're dealing with them. But you can't deprive yourself of the international obligations.
So would you say that the stand that the government has taken so far suggests that they are looking at the entire community as, the kind of blanket judgment that's been given out by the government on the community?
That's right. After all, how can you say that they are a threat? They means Rohingyas. There are good people, there are bad people, there are those who may be a threat, the others are just starving. They are dying. They are in need of some aid and advice and safety. So
Yes.
therefore, I really feel very sad that this kind of a broadside statement was made with regard to the entire community. India has got only about 1,000, I think, and other countries like Bangladesh have got more than 40,000 of these people. But they are talking to Myanmar and working out arrangements for sending them back to their country. That's what we should have done instead of threatening that we cannot because they are a threat. We tarred them all black.
Sure, stay with us please, Mr. Tulsi. I do also want to take that point across to Dr. Surya Dev, the Indian advisor, UNHRC, who is still with us. Dr. Dev, that's the reaction, of course, coming in. Broadly speaking, if we just take a look back at the centre's stand, do you agree with the fact that there cannot be any blanket judgment, as we've been discussing, on the entire Rohingya community? Yes, some members might be posing a threat to national security, but it is for the government to really decide which are those members and actually not pass a blanket judgment.
Before I answer this question, I should clarify that I'm not India's advisor to the UN. Basically, I'm an independent expert. Of course, I'm an Indian citizen. But I'm an Indian, but I'm not Indian government's advisor. I'm an independent expert advising the UN bodies on the issue of business and human rights.
Yes.
Just to clarify that.
Yes.
In terms of the question, I think, as I mentioned at the outset, whenever you deal with a potential threat, which is about the national security or law and order situation, you should react based on the evidence at hand. These are to be decided on a case-by-case basis, and if there is concrete information available about anyone. And these need not be just people who are seeking asylum or refugee status in India. These could be even Indians who are living in India or Indians living outside. You cannot say that this group of people, this community, is more prone or all of them together are potential terrorists. We cannot say like that. This is going to infringe, in fact, Article 14.
Yes.
This will be arbitrary. This is not going to be sustained in a court of law. You cannot do this.
All right, and Dr. Dev, according to you, as we've been discussing this crisis, which has, of course, in a way become a political issue as well, what, according to you, needs to be done by both Myanmar and India to ensure that the rights of the members of this community are safeguarded?
I think there are two things which, in my view, the Indian government should consider doing. One is they should do some internal consultation and come up with a policy to deal with refugees. Because it's not the case that India has not accepted refugees in the past. We have, from a range of different situations and in different contexts in different countries. So it is better to have a national policy on this issue, and then India should ratify the relevant international instruments on this issue and then make it consistent with what the requirements are under the Indian constitutional law and the case law of the Supreme Court on that point. That is the internal thing India should be doing. At the external level, I think it should cooperate, as I mentioned, with other member states in the region, and it should cooperate with the UN agencies on this. And they should be willing to take their fair share of refugees. Bangladesh can take it. I mean, Bangladesh is not economically as strong and powerful as India is. If a country like Bangladesh is willing to take those refugees which are facing huge risk and social and economic conditions are not good as well, then why cannot India play its part? I think it should do its part, and it should work with other states to ensure that these people are screened properly and they are sent back if the environment is safe in Myanmar. Otherwise, they should be accommodated in different countries.
All right, we're going to leave it there for the moment. Dr. Surya Dev and Mr. KTS Tulsi, appreciate you joining us in the broadcast with all of those views and perspectives that will, of course, remain our top focus in our later editions as well.